Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us now. Colonel, thank you very much for your time. Colonel, over the weekend, the Congress of the United States voted to send $61 billion to Ukraine, $20 billion, which is $11 billion more than had been advertised, to the Israelis, $5 billion to the Taiwanese, and they made it easier for America's spy agencies to spy on ordinary Americans without suspicion and without warrants. Does anybody care about the Constitution anymore?
Judge, I don't think they do. I think we live in a post-constitutional society, sadly.
What is your view of the danger or recklessness of this $61 billion for Ukraine, recognizing as we do that the lion's share of it stays here and goes directly into American industry?
Judge, I think to a large extent you've answered your own question. There are two things at work here. One is obviously the domestic angle, essentially transferring cash from the government to the supporters of the people, the donors to the campaigns of the people that voted for the legislation. Effectively standing up and waving the Ukrainian flag as a signal that I got your message, received your re-election campaign contribution, much appreciated. That's about it. As far as Ukraine is concerned, whatever shows up to Ukraine, as Ambassador Burns and the CIA pointed out some time ago, most of it will disappear into bank accounts around the world for Mr. Zelensky and his little band of men who have been robbing the place blind since they came into power. I imagine some of it will go to pay what's left of the Ukrainian army, which isn't very much, and to sustain what's left of the administration. I think the hope is that somehow or another, this will conceal the complete and utter destruction of the Ukrainian nation, which is already well underway and sadly is going to continue through the summer.
Let me show you a visual example of how misguided the Congress is, how childlike and how absurd it can be. This is the moment on the floor of the House of Representatives when the vote was tallied, and the person in the speaker's chair was not the speaker, it's just whoever was chosen to preside at that moment, declared that the legislation had passed. I'm sure you'll be able to see what's in the hands of many members of Congress, which, of course, is a violation of federal law.
I missed it, but thank you. Okay. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The chair would remind my colleagues to observe proper decorum. Flag waving on the floor is not appropriate. The House will be in order. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise? I said, no. The gentlewoman from Florida.
Stand up.
Put the damn flag. Okay. The gentlewoman is not recognized. Colleagues, no, I'm going to. The House will be in order.
That was a Republican congresswoman from Florida who voted against the legislation, expressing her anger and fury at the childishness of these Republicans. There were some Democrats who did it as well, waving Ukrainian flags on the floor. Do these people have any idea? How would you know? But do you think they have any idea the harm they're causing by this?
Probably not, but I'm also convinced that they're not terribly concerned one way or the other.
Yes, you're right.
I think everybody thinks in this country in terms of the private sector. What's our return on our investment at the end of the quarter? Nobody's thinking much beyond that. And right now, I've made it possible for me to receive more money for re-election, and I'm supporting a cause that everybody around me tells me is a good thing. I don't care about the facts, and I'm not concerned about the strategic impact of what I'm doing. This is not new. This has always been true in the House. It was less so in the Senate. for much of our history, but unfortunately, I don't see a great deal of difference now. But this is a catastrophe that is clearly and unambiguously the fault of the current government. I hope Americans are watching, but then again, I don't know that they are. I mean, why would we send money to Taiwan? Well, let's keep something else in mind too, Judge. I realize that this government in Washington, speaking as it does for the American people, has effectively said that it rejects any relationship with Moscow on the basis of conditions that we do not set. In other words, unless the Russians all agree to adopt whatever we tell them is appropriate for their society and for their government, unless they remove the people that currently govern them, unless they put their arms down, join hands, and sing Kumbaya with us, we can't get along with the Russians. Well, sending this kind of money towards Ukraine at this stage signals to the Russians that any hope of a relationship with Washington is dead. And that's why Foreign Minister Lavrov, within the last 48 hours, was interviewed and asked what would happen if there were negotiations and whether or not Moscow was still receptive to negotiations. And he said, yes, we will be receptive to negotiations, but keep in mind two things. First of all, just because we negotiate, we will not stop fighting. We will continue until we have achieved all of our objectives militarily. And then secondly, and very importantly, we are not going to cease hostilities for even a brief period of time because we know that we are going to hold what we've won. Effectively, the facts on the ground have changed, and we are no longer willing to talk about trades in what kind of territory we're willing to surrender to you in order to have peace.
Right.
It's over. And we've made fools out of ourselves. And worst of all, we've made fools out of NATO. NATO looks weak and stupid. The Ukrainian state is ruined. Whatever emerges after this will be a rump state. And that rump state will effectively be a demilitarized zone, a DMZ. And in it will live Ukrainians that can tend to their fields and go about their lives, but there will be no military power that threatens Russia.
Colonel, I think we've been through this before, but what was Putin's rationale for moving troops into Ukraine? And wouldn't that rationale apply in the West as well?
No, in Western Ukraine, I think his argument.
I meant to the United States.
Well, at this stage, he's learned some hard lessons, as have his colleagues in the Russian government. That you can't trust us. Whatever we say is a lie. The Minsk Accords, of course, set the stage for that. And now I think there's just a readiness to say, the hell with it. We'll end this on our terms as we see fit. Now, they don't want to march all the way to the Polish border. I've always said that. That's never been in the cards. They're not interested in it, but they'll do it if they feel it's necessary. But they will stipulate very clearly what the conditions are in Western Ukraine. In the United States, it's a matter of what do we do next? We don't seem to think that there are either limits to our interests or to our resources. And that's untrue. We're exhausting our resources. Everyone inside the military understands that. The Defense Department knows it. We don't have much left to fight with at this stage. If we have to go to war, we're in a lot of trouble. So now we've created a second front in the Middle East that was never really necessary. And apparently that's not even enough. They'd like to have a third front in Asia, which is utterly preposterous. And we have no interest in either area to broaden or expand a war. So this is the problem. No sense of limits to our resources and no sense of limits to our interests.
Colonel, over the weekend, there were rumors, which came from several sources, of 1,000 French troops on the ground near Odessa. There were rumors of President Putin being rushed to the Kremlin in the middle of the night on Sunday night. What do you make of this stuff?
Well, Putin may well have been rushed to the Kremlin, but I'm not sure what the reason was, and I'm also not convinced that's not unusual. I mean, he's the head of state. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and princes are regularly awakened in the middle of the night to deal with issues. But as it turns out, no one in Odessa has seen any French or American forces, and I hope for their sake and for the sake of the West as well as the East in this fight, we don't see any. Because if we go into Odessa, that's essentially a war with Russia. And Russia doesn't want a war with us, and we obviously have no interest in a war with them. So we need to stay out, because that's essentially the same as, let's imagine the Russians decided to occupy Tijuana, just across the border from the United States. Look at the border and look at where Tijuana is located, and put 40 or 50,000 troops there. And they would face almost instantly, overnight, hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops. We would regard that as an act of war, and we would crush it. And that's exactly what the Russians will do. And then the danger is that some fool in Washington will say, well, we can't allow this to happen. And we'll try to find something else that we can do to provoke Russia, or worse, escalate to the nuclear level, which is, as President Putin has said, Armageddon. And that's something that neither he nor we want. So this is stupidity on stilts once again.